Good morning. This is Bill from Auto Europa Naples on a lovely Florida Tuesday. There's not a bird on the wire, there's not a plane in the sky, although I did just start filming, so all that's probably going to change. The weather, I'm not going to go into it in depth because God knows I'm getting a lot of flack, but it's very, very nice. It's not quite 70 degrees, it's not humid, and it's quite lovely outside. And I do have this 1999 Mercedes-Benz Sl500 Roadster. This is a fantastic car. It really, really is. And it's an underrated, undervalued car. This is the R129 series of SL Roadster. The SL is the only Mercedes currently made. There is a 2020 model that can trace its lineage all the way back to the post-war period. People calling on. Look at that, Andrew Farrar. Yeah, I'll call him later. Anyway, it's the only SL that can trace its way all the way back to 1952 actually is when the Le Mans version came out. And that is when Mercedes-Benz decided that they needed a race car. And they very promptly came up with one. Now remember, I mean, this is a car company rebuilding itself from the ashes. I mean, it, had suffered massively during World War II. It was bombed, it was beaten, it was blown up, and they were just getting their footing again. So I guess they figured that having a race car would help to make a name for them. And they designated a guy to come out with a race car. So he did. He made, back in 1952, the thing had an aluminum and magnesium frame and gull wing doors. It was incredible. It was called the 300 SL, which eventually became, thanks to a guy, an importer, American importer named Max Hoffman, became a road-going car also by the 300 SL nomenclature, also known as the gull wing. That's a car that you may know. And because that car became so incredibly iconic, it has carried that. A lot of Mercedes-Benz, there was an S, but there wasn't an S. There was, look at it in modern times. You've got the ML came out in '98. That's that white car. That became the GLE at one point. I mean, they just change all this crap around. But the SL has been the SL, has been the SL since 1952, 1954 for the consumer model. And that's pretty impressive. And the reason for that is very simple. There's maybe 1 billion cars in the world today. Let's just call it 1 billion. Probably less, but let's call it 1 billion. Of those cars, very, very few are iconic. Think Volkswagen Beetle, Porsche 911, that sort of thing. Well, the Mercedes-Benz SL is iconic. Since it came out, it has truly been the standard of wealth, across the world, certainly in the United States. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, if you were driving a current SL, then you were a pretty big cheese, and that, that meant a lot. Now again, the first SL was basically gussied up Le Mans car that they made streetable. That very quickly changed. They had the 300 SL. At the same time, they ran a cheaper, lighter thing called the 190 SL, which was much more attainable by the masses. Still expensive, but attainable. That gave way to the Pagoda, the W113 chassis. We've done a couple of those recently, called the Pagoda because of its hardtop design. The Pagoda gave way to the R107. That car just absolutely symbolized wealth in the 70s and 80s in the United States. I mean, every TV show from Chips to Heart used an R107 when they wanted to get a moneyed person across, and just an absolute movie and TV star. And that car ran for 18 years. It had a very, very long production run. By the time it finished up here in the States in '89, it was still a fantastic car, but it was essentially a vintage piece designed in the 60s. And if Mercedes was going to replace that iconic 107, they had to come out with something pretty special. And they did, and that's this car, the R129. It was designed by Bruno Sacco, one of Mercedes-Benz most famous and long-term designers. He called this his most perfect car, which is pretty high praise from a guy like Bruno. It used the same soft-top, hard-top design, and it, was essentially, like every other SL in terms of being heavy and fast and, you know, fun. But it was a sea change from the earlier one. I mean, everything was updated. And here is what's neat about this car, and I think why it's undervalued today, is that it is a clash of old meets new in the Mercedes world. You know, towards the end of the 90s, Mercedes bought Chrysler. A lot of people see that as a low point for the maker. You know, I'm torn on that. But either way, Mercedes had to modernize and become a different kind of company. They couldn't just build these incredibly over-engineered pieces that, you know, cost a fortune to buy, to build. The profit margins were slim. The production was, you know, fairly low. I mean, production had been pretty high for SLs, but, you know, all in all, they were a company just for the rich. And they desperately wanted to change that and become a high-end company that shared more with Volkswagen than the original Mercedes-Benz. Well, the original Mercedes-Benz features heavily in this R129 model, and I think that's something that makes it very, very special. When it came out, it had a lot of firsts. It was the first car to have the seatbelts integrated into the seats. It was the first car to have a fully automatic convertible top, you know, fabric top, the way it works. It added things like traction control. It updated the suspension, you know, from the previous car into a much more modern multi-link rear end. It had some really, really neat features, and featured, most of all, a very big V8 up front. The M113, I believe it was when the car came out, which was a 32-valve, you know, V8, putting out about 330 horsepower, more than just about anything at the time, and was an absolute sea change. I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to pause all my lengthy, boring diatribe for a moment and put the top down so you can see what that's like. See if I can find the keys here. And of course, I put them in the wrong pocket. Then we'll get more into this car. Now, back in 1990, when this car came out in the United States, let's fire it up. This would draw a crowd. You would run this big jujube-looking button back. The windows would go down. It would unbolt with a bit of a bang from the front, a little bit unsettling at first. And you can see then the fabric top very neatly goes back into a little pit at the rear, and then this hard tonneau cover comes down. Very, very quick, very cool, and I'm telling you, when you ran that on a, you know, sort of crowded sidewalk, you know, people stopped. They paid attention. There was really nothing else like that at the time. It's an electro-hydraulic top that works really, really quick and is awfully cool to witness. You know, now a bunch of cars have it. It's not all that special anymore, but this was truly the first. They did give you this little windscreen, which was nice. You could flip that up. It would keep down buffeting. And that is attached to this other electro-hydraulic roll bar that you could raise or lower manually, or it would pop up, you know, kind of like with the airbag system in the event of collision and give you rollover protection. But anyway, there it is. So that is now open-topped, two-seat roadstering at its finest, and that is what the SL was about. I mean, this car weighed more than 2 tons. The days when it was super light, which is what SL stands for, were long gone, and instead it was really sort of a grand touring, you know, Autobahn cruiser with, you know, tremendous stability, lovely feel, and terrific power. Now, it also did have a hardtop. They came standard with the car. This nice big fiberglass aluminum hardtop structure, which you could pick up with 2 people, place on top of the car while the fabric top was stowed, bolt down, you know, hydraulically, you press the button, it sucks it down, seals it in place, and then you've essentially got a coupe with all the stiffness and sealing and, you know, winter top sort of features that make the car nice and tight and safe from the elements. That's why they didn't spend too much time worrying about insulating that fabric top. It's just sort of a summer feature. You know, when winter rolls around, you're kind of expected to put that thing on and, you know, drive that way. Anyway, so the car came out in 1990. It was Bruno Sacco's masterpiece in his mind. It was very, very much like the earlier Mercedes, the way the interior went together, the way the exterior looked. It had the lower cladding like the 126 S-Classes at the time. Back then it had very square side view mirrors. It had some stupid stuff like a power center view mirror inside, which everybody broke. It was ridiculous, so they dumped it later on. But it was very much like the earlier Mercedes. And that, again, is what I like about the R129. I mean, it does feel like an updated 560 SL, just better and safer and faster. And that's pretty cool. You know, the way the carpet goes together, the way the wood is, the way the leather is, it is all very Teutonic and vintage Mercedes. Now, in '99, they changed a few things. For one thing, they changed the motor, and there's some debate about which one is better, the one that came before it or this one. That's up to you. I'm not going to, tell you what I think, but I will say this. They did put in a less complicated, now 3-valve per cylinder V8 that put out about 302 horsepower and ran for the next 6 or 7 years. It went into the next generation SL as well, and is considered to be pretty damn bulletproof. Earlier on, they had updated the transmission. It went from hydraulic to an electronic 5-speed, which is great, a terrific, perfect shifting transmission that does everything it's supposed to do with no fuss at all. And then, they did a few little other updates. They got xenon headlamps up front, all very nice. They went from 3 vents in the fenders to 2 for some bizarre reason. They changed the wheels. They made the door poles body color. They added some new colors. They changed the leather inside, which we'll get into a minute. It went from this sort of, early Teutonic stuff that you'd recognize from, a 1982 Mercedes to a much richer, softer Napa leather that probably doesn't have the same wear factor as the earlier stuff, but it is nicer to sit in. And the mirrors, of course, became more oval. Anyway, let's get into this thing. We're going to start inside the trunk. So to get in here, you push this guy here and pop it up. And here's what you can see I'm talking about with the way this car went together. I'm going to loose fuse panel here. But anyway, you can see this now is very much like a vintage Mercedes. This little thing here is meant to cover the windscreen when it's removed. You've got a CD changer here. You've got your first aid kit, everything a wounded German might need. But there is a lovely fit and finish in this trunk. Get up under here. This is just like the 107, where you can lift it and get into the spare tire. There you see the tool kit. This thing was German owned, so they really looked after it well. The Germans really do that. There's a full-size spare tire, very, very nice stuff, and everything lovely back there. And again, you can see the quality is there with the beautiful carpeting around the back of the trunk. Everything just sort of neat and nice and proper. And of course, with the price tag up near $100,000, I guess it better be. Anyway, all very nice stuff under the back. Let's have a look up front. All right, so this is a very nice feature. I love the release here built into the hood star. That's kind of cool. For the new engine, they also prettied up the engine cover, this black plastic thing. That does look better than the prior engine cover. But anyway, you can see everything just neat and tidy and proper here. It went from 4 cams to 2 cams. It added a spark plug, so it now has 2 per cylinder. That was, enabled it to sort of meet California emissions. 302 horsepower, slightly lower torque and horsepower ratings than the prior V8, but was quicker by better use of that torque. So, all in all, a terrific engine. And frankly, they've been pretty bulletproof. We've been dealing in these things for years, and they really don't give us any troubles at all. Every now and again, you put in a valve cover gasket or something, but, mechanically, absolutely flawless. Very little issues at all. I like the way the oil filter is sort of easy to get to. The oil filler is easy to get to. It's one of the last Benzes that the private owner could kind of maintain himself without too much issue. This one does have the xenon headlight option, pretty expensive at the time and a nice feature. Really lights up the way. And you see those two big electric cooling fans up front. Here is the ABS pump, and you know, very nice stuff to keep the car. You know, the ESP came standard on this model. It was optional in the earlier ones, and that was a very advanced traction control that would actually brake individual wheels to help keep you on the pavement. Here comes Marty rolling in his morning Infiniti. I'll kind of give him a break. He's had a rough couple days, so I don't need to torture him. But God, it is fun to do that. Anyway, everything lovely under the hood of this low mileage SL. Hood sponge in good shape. No issues there at all. All very proper. Look at that big long hood. It sort of harkens to 1930s cars, and you know, that is what I love about the Mercedes SL. You know, there really weren't that many attainable exotics in the 1990s. There really weren't. You know, this was kind of it. If you wanted something that was fairly easy to drive, you know, that your sort of old unmarried aunt could still drive to the grocery store, but then you could hop in and do 140 on the Autobahn. This was it. I mean, there really just wasn't that much in the way of competition. The 911 was still, you know, sort of an ass-engined, air-cooled, fidgety, whirring clang. A wonderful piece, but just not as attainable as this. It did have new rims for this generation. Good-looking 5-star alloys. You see those big brakes behind it. The cladding long ago became body color, which I think was an improvement. And it started using infrared and what the hell is the other thing? Wireless, I don't know, two different kind of systems for the key, which apparently work quite nice. They also changed the tail lamps to something a little bit more modern, and they made the exhaust pipe, that big pipe down there, visible. Let's hop in. Okay, there you can see the Napa leather. Looks much more modern, looks much more like current cars than the prior leather did. All very nice stuff. You see that beautiful big chrome Mercedes-Benz kick plate there for, you know, rubbing your feet against as you get in. And this is the stuff that I'm talking about with it being still a vintage Mercedes. The way the carpet carries over into the side, the way the trim fits together, the way the door panels go together with the leather stitching, this beautiful walnut. They give you this little pocket here if you know, that's a nice spot there. You could definitely put a big revolver in there. Probably even a Mac 10 might fit in that thing. So if you need to become a force of nature with a big gun, you got it right in your map pocket. Also side airbags this year. Let's hop in. Okay, a few little things inside we'll point out. This car did add key tip, so you could just twist it and it would start. You could just let go, just like that. You see how well that worked. Anyway, very, very neat feature. Turn the radio down there. And here again is what I'm talking about with this in terms of being a vintage Mercedes. It retained a very Mercedes-like instrument cluster with the same hieroglyphics. They did add little chrome rings to it and kind of changed the color in the back. But I mean, this is the same essential cluster that you would have got in a 1983 300 SD. I mean, it is very, very Mercedes. The fuel gauge there, you've got your analog fuel economy needle, you've got your water temp, you've got your oil temperature. That changed oil pressure in this car from, you know, I guess they figured the temp was more important to you. You've got your 6,000 red line tack over there, and of course an analog clock. You've also got a little, oh God, more calls. In the beginning, this had analog, you know, trip and odo. They did move to digital. I want to say in 95 or 6, they updated that. But the two stalks, all very vintage Mercedes, as is this headlight switch. Again, right out of a Pagoda, you know, same style, same exactly. These two little red lights are part of a K40 radar detector. You can see the control. Try to get in there. There it is here. You know, that's like a $1,500 radar detectors the dealers install to make money. They put in a power tilt and telescoping steering wheel. That's nice, and that's a nice update from earlier SLs, which had none of that. Very traditional wiper stock, cruise control stock, lovely. Key still over on the dashboard instead of the column like that. Oh God, let me get my seatbelt on. And we'll keep going. Okay, here on the dash, you press this guy and it gives you a neat little spot that my detailer didn't bother cleaning. Good place to hide your narcotics or another little 9mm. You've got your vents here, very nice stuff. You can shut them off with this. This was one of the first cars to give you a passenger airbag sensor, so if somebody weighed less than 26 pounds, you know, you're carrying carpenters or whatnot, the airbag would not turn on, it would be off. And that was a pretty new feature then, but isn't everything now. They also had updated all of this climate control stuff, so that went from manual to proper LCD, whatnot. Looks nice. They went to fiber optic on the radio, and the CD changer came standard with Bose sound. Good radios in these cars. Down here you've got your trunk release. This turns off the motion sensor in the event of getting towed, which frankly these cars don't very often. This is just a door lock switch. This is your hazard switch. This turns on and off your traction control, although it's a bit of a joke having that button there. They only give you so much control. You can turn off your traction control, but the minute it feels that the car is slipping and beyond your control, it turns it right back on. The German nanny comes in wagging her finger at you. This is the manual control for the roll bar. If you want to sport yourself around a little bit, pull that windscreen off it, run the roll bar up, and it looks all very sporty. Down here you've got your power mirror control, your gated shifter, nice little aluminum knob, your winter and summer setting on the shifter. Again, the 5-speed electronic transmission. This one has the optional heated seats, your power windows. In this little roller compartment here, Mercedes did discover that people do want cup holders, so they gave you those, and they also gave you a way to fold them out of the way and make it a container. Another spot my detailer didn't clean. The center armrest, pretty cool feature. You can slide it forward. If you're short, your elbow's up close, you get more of that. Press the button, it opens up, and there's a fantastic original Mercedes Motorola phone that's nice to see up there for collectability. Up here you have a self-dimming mirror with your garage door openers. This was the voice command for the phone. You could run it, Bluetooth style. It won't work the same way today. It's all an old analog phone system. But you could, a lot of movie directors did this. So, you're driving around LA and you're yelling at, your key grip to go beat the crap out of somebody or something. So that is nice that you had that phone system. Let's go for a spin. Now it does use the traditional Mercedes recirculating ball steering, which can feel a little bit sluggish compared to rack and Jesus Christ. Pinion, sorry, but does have a very luxurious feel to it and lovely on-center feel. It's terrific for the highway. And then just the smoothness. I'm going to take a right and head towards the crap section of town here because the sun is annoying. Little bit of wheel spin. You see that triangle flashing when we get wheel spin. That's the ESP letting you know it's kicking on. But you get terrific instant torque out of this thing. If I put it in W winter mode, it's going to leave in second gear, and you get a much smoother start, even if you hammer the throttle. Now again, you get the double wishbone up front, you get the trailing link in back. It has a very modern suspension in this car that delivers power to the pavement incredibly well and feels stable at any speed. God, that's loud. Let all these guys pass. And that is what the SL is truly about. Even though they left that whole Le Mans race car thing that they had going, they always retained powerful and well-handled platforms to pay homage to its roots, the race car roots. Also, it was a showcase for their technology. This always had the most cutting-edge stuff in it, the SLs. The highest price tag, the most modern features. A lot of groundbreaking things came out in the Mercedes SL. Driving on the road, it's incredible. I mean, this 2+ ton car, it feels heavy while at the same time feels very nimble, feels very controllable. Turning radius is fantastic, as it is with most Mercedes of this vintage. I don't know what kind of temperature we got. Yeah, it's hot enough. Let's give it a little hammer. Alright, so as you can see, it's absolutely no slouch. It gets up and moves. And, you know, again, that's what SLs are for. That's part of the point of this thing. And anyway, here's the long story short. These things are so undervalued. I mean, here's a 78,000 mile, 2-owner example, German maintained, that's just absolutely phenomenal and can be bought cheap. I mean cheap, for a car that's stickered at like 90 grand. You know, and has been well maintained, garage, dealer service. This thing should cost twice as much. It really should. You know, you can argue with me about that, but I just don't think it's debatable. The nice thing is too, the 129s are starting to become appreciated, and like every other SL before it, should start trekking up in value. So, might be a good time to get into one. Maintenance, you know, if you get a good one like this, it's limited. You know, you don't want to buy something that's had a ton of deferred maintenance, and then you're going to have to do it all. But you know, one that's been looked after like this car, it's not going to hurt you too bad. You take it to, you know, a pretty good tech, not the dealership, but somebody who, you know, left the dealership to make his own way. You could probably, you know, get a pretty good price on repairs and really enjoy driving one of the most beautifully crafted cars of all time. So all lovely stuff. Anyway, there it is. This is a 99 Mercedes-Benz SL500 R129 Roadster. This one is for sale at our lot, aenaples.com. But whether you're looking at this one or any other one, don't let people scare you off these cars. They're a lot better than some people say they are. You listen to the right guys, they'll tell you how good they are. They really do have a lot of lovely vintage Mercedes in them. Beautiful craftsmanship, beautiful styling. Some of the best people who ever worked at Mercedes were involved in this car. And it's a treat to own, a treat to drive, nice to look at, and you'll love having one around. Thanks very much for having a look. We really appreciate it. Try to put something together for tomorrow and see what's out there. Take care.